Good morning, world. This is Kara St. Louis. Welcome to the second episode of 13. I will warn you right now that neither one of the people who usually edit this show for me at this point are home today. So it's going to go out raw, with the exception of the things that I can do for it on YouTube, which actually are a few things. They give you some tools, YouTube does. So anyway, but that doesn't matter, because what I've discovered in thinking about putting this little essay program, show together for the people who want to enter into a deeper discussion about certain things, is that essentially the way I work is when something comes across my desk that needs to be said or needs to be put into the discussion or really lights me on fire, then I really need to sit down and get it out. I need to get it out as soon as it comes to me. So that's exactly what I'm doing today. It is 13.2, and what I had said last time was that we would continue to discuss some of the, not the finer points even, but try to sort of dig in a little bit into the false chronology, because that was difficult. It was difficult for people to encounter and get their heads around, for the most part, and that's fine. It's completely understandable, but let's see if we can crack the nut a little bit more than we have already. So what I said last time was that, and I've got some things in front of me because I did come across something that made me start writing again on some of the subjects. What I found was that there are crossovers. There have to be crossovers, because this whole thing is a piece. It's tightly knit together and thrown over us in a complete piece. So, as Randy Moggins said to me the other night, we are reverse engineering. We're reverse engineering all of this, and the best way to do that, the only way to do that, is to do it in parts. And when I pull a part out that I recognize as part of the hologram that we're living in, that we're drowning in, it's easier to engage with the falsity of it. And as you go through the numbers with each piece, you see where they're going to sync up with the other pieces, and sometimes you don't, but they will. Anyway, the thing you have to be careful of, though, when you're coming back to it and making a whole piece of it, is that is actually the trance. We're very, very used to that whole piece as hypnosis, really, as what keeps us from understanding what is authentic about who we are and this space that we inhabit. So sometimes, though, you start to study something and it does touch both realms. And in this was really exciting, this discovery I made yesterday or the day before, and I've been writing about it, and it will go into many presentations, and I want to tell you about it, because what I had said to begin with was that we would have a look at what the parameters were, the points of comparison, what exactly, the folks who are studying this false chronology decided were commonalities that could be extracted and studied from one dynasty to the next, or one piece of history to the next, or one story to the next that didn't seem to be holding water. And that would make it easier for us to sort of give some examples and talk about why these are solid examples of the whole situation. Okay, so one of the things that I decided to do was investigate the month of February. And that seems really random and weird, but it's really not. And actually, I was looking at February because I knew that February itself is attached to the Fae, and the Fae are one of the reasons that this hologram is being cast about us. February, February. And I was kind of going back through my notes to remember, because my memory was that in the Julian calendar, or prior to that, February had been the first month of the year. And then when Pope Gregory XIII got a hold of it, and January was made the first month of the year, it was kind of subsequent to that. my reading right now takes me to, my research right now takes me to this idea that there was a period of time when the winter actually was of a piece of itself. There were no months, which is actually kind of interesting if you're not a fan of winter. There were no months assigned to this period of time. Maybe there was no winter. I don't know. That's a distinct and radical possibility. But and then there came to be a time when there were months that were assigned to winter. All right. Now, on a personal note, which I always make you guys listen to my stories, and there will be a few in this episode. On a personal note, I have to tell you that the month of February has always been the most dismal point of the year for me. And I dreaded its arrival and couldn't wait to get through it. And, was very excited when March arrived, even though I knew that, spring and summer were still quite a ways away. And I always thought that the reason for that had to do with the way I grew up, because in my house, both of my parents' birthdays were in February, and of course Valentine's Day is always in February, which is a huge landmine, as we all know, filled with landmines, as we all know. And they also managed to pick February to get married in, and for some reason, my dad, whose birthday was 9 days ahead of my mother's, always managed to forget her birthday or mess up Valentine. I don't know. It was just not a great month in our house, and so I always thought that that's probably why I detested February as much as I did. Now I don't think that's the case. When I realized that February was, the month in which we mark, it was all kinds of things, which will be revealed in Fae lectures, which will be recorded. I mean, it's looking to me like there's going to be an entire Fae book eventually, and certainly there's the book that I'm writing with Maria. All of this will be laid out for you, and it may be laid out in further episodes of 13. I don't know. February has to do with the Fae. February has to do with the Fae for lots and lots and lots of reasons. Okay. Now, and some of this I'm writing about right now, you're going to get read to today. Sometimes that's going to happen because it's not really sort of in my autopilot at this point. But when I was researching this particular aspect, February, thinking that this would go to the chronology and it would also go to the Fae, it certainly did. But guess what? Guess what? You know that my primary sources, amongst others, of course, but two of the people that I cite the most often are Dr. Anatoly Fomenko and Mr. Erhard Landmann from Germany. They both wrote about this. And I came across Landmann's assessment of the false chronology. Erhard Landmann addressed this idea of the false chronology along with the Fae, and he did not address it as an astronomer or even really a mathematician per se. Erhard Landmann was an IT guy. He was one of those sort of John Nash characters that you would see patterns in words and things and put them all together. And if you've looked at the episode 2 of the Fae, you'll see quite a bit of his etymological research that goes to the Fae, and that has to do with seeing patterns in words and seeing patterns in words globally, whether they're Spanish or English or German. So Landmann did something with the chronology, and that excites me because that tells me that we are really in fertile territory. We're in fertile territory here. So let me see if you'll bear with me and let me read a few of the things that I wrote yesterday because I want to, and because you're sitting right there listening to me, okay? But here go the glasses anyway. All right, here we go. So, the false chronology, along with several other deep and powerful attempts at mind control and the determination of human perception and endeavor, are in place and aggressively effected in order to take us to forgetting, and that's forgetting with a capital F. There are two ways to encounter this for truth, clarity, and freedom. One, just what are the programs in place to contain us? And two, what is it they'd like us to forget? My discovery of research that seems to indicate the presence of a seed race or set of ancestors called the Fae in conjunction with the Full Tilt campaign to change any and all perceptions of these beings, leads me to believe that this race is one of the things that we're meant to forget. That begs lots of questions, such as why? Well, it could well be that false dynasties and governments have been erected in the place where some other forms of social intercourse stood. It could be that we are so difficult to subdue, meaning it requires a full-on massive attack of our perceptions, for that really is what it is, an attack on our perception. Because we are truly descendants of this mighty, gentle race, and so are quite powerful ourselves, and although we seem to know it not, journey with me, please, as we reverse engineer the illusion under which we labor. It's vital that the subject matter for each of these areas at which I am looking be served up as separate courses. See, this, I just said this. But I want you to bear with me because this is really important, and I've got it down precisely here, and I want to be precise right now. It's vital that the subject matter for each of the areas at which I'm looking to be served up as separate courses, otherwise it's just too much. However, as I start to consider the many crossovers and overlaps, I see how easily the tapestry will weave itself back together. Therein lies a bit of danger, because the whole piece unconsidered becomes the trance again, easily enough. My intention for now has been to discuss one point, which I absolutely know crosses into both the Fae and the false chronology. Just one, to demonstrate how easily this all goes together, and that point would revolve around the simple fact of the month of February, its history and its origins, and its evolution, as well as its relegation into dry numbers and meaninglessness. It always gladdens my heart when I'm working with this machine that has been built over us and around us, and it clearly just goes back together after it's taken apart. And I suppose this must be what it feels like for someone who likes to take apart a car or any other machine to see how it works. And then it goes back together again as predicted, and it functions as predicted, and mystery solved for sure. As I was encountering the idea of February again, as something deeply attached to the Fae, I encountered yet another discussion by Erhard Landmann, and this time on the false chronology. Erhard Landmann, you recall, offered me the first real hard evidence of this race, the Fae. He wrote in the 1980s about Scaliger, Petravius, and Pope Gregory. I was stunned when I saw this. I was stunned and yet not stunned, and that's how the study of the Fae has been for me. I mean, it's all there, just like everything else that we study. Chemtrailing, geoengineering, mind control. It's all right there in front of our faces. But because the whole thing is woven together and we're used to that tapestry, we don't see it. It's really important to break this into pieces. And that's not something I usually like to do. I like to make sure we've got context, but I think each one of these pieces has enough context that we're going to be okay with this. All right? He wrote about Scaliger, Petravius, and Pope Gregory and explained quite simply why the task of recreating history was assigned to those two men, by whom, and how easy it was for contemporaries like Johannes Kepler and Isaac Newton to catch the merest glimpse of what was being served up as the chronology and react in the strongest possible terms. You'll remember that Isaac Newton, this was the last book he wrote before he died, was aggressively attacking this chronology. So my foray into the idea of February as a crossover point for readers to observe leads me to say, Mr. Landmann, meet Dr. Fomenko. Dr. Fomenko, meet Mr. Landmann. I love that. How glorious are these synchronicities. Erhard Landmann wrote the following article in 2008 entitled The Deception with the Year Zero. It's really not as long as you might think, but it's important. In 1582, Pope Gregor XIII had a problem in that the date for Easter celebration, I want to talk about Easter too, don't let me forget, For the Easter celebration was out by roughly 10 days, or 9 3/4 to be precise, according to the Julian calendar in use at that time. He had it corrected, and 5 months later the following happened. He commissioned a certain monk by the name of Joseph Scaliger to deal with this problem, and Scaliger got help by another monk by the name of Dionysius Petavius. That's what he styled himself, but his name was really Denis Patau, and they were both French. And you remember, there was some conjecture. I was wondering because they are presented as if they were one after the other, but my assumption has always been that they worked at the same time, and I think that that's what Landman is saying as well. They were two friends, and the friends then set about writing history according to the old Catholic documents. Landman infers the obvious when he states, if you do not smell a rat at this point. However, according to Landman, they were actually quite clumsy in their working of the historical timeline. Any research done in the proper way today would, as of logical necessity, come back with the realization that very shoddy operators were at work. The problem today is that this timeline is by and large accepted as the gold standard by our studious historical academic researchers, and everything they find or discover is being shoehorned into this utterly fabricated tale of humankind. And that's not the only problem. One of the other problems is all of the original documents are gone. They're not accessible. You can't check the facts. And they disappeared at the same time that Scaliger and Patau were writing this new chronology. Okay? The Julian calendar is supposed to go back to Julius Caesar, who supposedly lived from the year 100 BC to 46 BC. All right? He's referencing his work with the Fae when he says the Julian calendar actually points out in its name, and if you've read the chronology or the Fae, you'll know this as well, that this kind of thing happens. Our ancestors from Jule, that's what Julian means in his evaluation of the word patterns that go along with talking about other galaxies or the universe or anything. Jule or Yule, perhaps, A-N, Julian. And this is a direct reference. It's part of our galaxy that they're thought to come from, the Fae. It's a direct reference to his work on the Fae, and in his mind, their traffic back and forth. It's clear they came, and etymologically it also seems they came and went. That's also clear. In the end, they stayed. Here we can see again that if the initial falsehood is accepted, then all the other falsehoods may make logical sense within the system, but the fundamental falsehood makes the whole chain of assumptions not any more truthful or realistic. In other words, the answer to those who would ask, why do all our historians go along within this, then lies in the original error. Error begets error, no matter how seemingly learned the scholar appears to be, or academic his language, and certainly footnoted correctly. All of the signs and symbols of proper scientific research in place, and absolute hogwash becomes validated, especially over a century or two. Now, I'm going to say this because we're going to have to think about this a little bit. So, even though this is much simpler than trying to understand this supposed special attribute of gravity that we don't understand, that explains why the moon went bananas for hundreds of years and then settled back down, which is how Fomenko and Morozov in Russia realized that there was something desperately wrong with the chronology. But this is a bit different tack. And you know, if you have a computer and you're the kind of person who understands how to back engineer this particular piece, feel free, because I would also love, when we talk about Easter, I think this goes to that as well. So listen, when was the calendar brought in? All right, a little math will help. The Julian calendar was based on a calculation of 365.25 days per year. The Gregorian correction calculated the year as 365.2422 days per year. The difference is 0.0078 days. If this figure, now here we go, this is what he figured out. If this figure is added up now by counting back the years until we get to the date within 10 days, when 10 days are full, go all the way back until there's not a 0.0078, okay, before the change in the calendar, in other words. We can count backward, and eventually the partial days start to add up to full days that go the other way. And then the dates don't match the events in our current timeline. Okay, this has to be sort of parsed out. Maybe we can parse this out together in the next episode. Maybe you're someone who likes running these sorts of computer programs, and you can go back. Certainly, this is simple math for someone like Erhard Landmann, and our computers are completely capable of handling this, okay? But what he's saying is if you go backwards and you eliminate the changes to the calendar, and you go back to a point in time where there were whole days and there were only whole days, then the events don't match up. The events don't match up with the calendar. So adding these partial days to make the events match up with the calendar, that's part of the scam. It really is part of the scam. So consider then the uber mysterious moon perturbations known as D, quote marks, a special gravity no one has ever identified or solved for. And that was noted by N.A. Mazarov, the Russian scientist. And what one has with those two pieces of evidence is basically a smoking gun. Okay, and even the most hardcore amateur scientists would have to sit up and take notice at this point and start looking for secondary evidence one way or the other if one was interested in knowing whether or not that this global fabrication had been enacted on us. Okay, so it can be considered a complex subject, but we're very, very fortunate that people who don't mind working with these complexities have worked on this for a while. Now I'm going to put my writing away for a second, I think. Yeah, I'm going to put my writing away because I want to talk to you about Easter, and that's part of this. That's part of it, okay? Because when I was thinking about the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar and dates that are fixed and dates that are not fixed, and the fact that, everything hinges around this 0 date that's supposedly when Jesus the Christ was born, okay? Most of my adult life, I've read that historians tend to agree that the man that we know as Jesus was probably not born on the 25th of December in the year 0. In fact, it's more likely he was born in September, and some people say he was born on September 11th. Regardless, the Catholic Church did not have a problem picking and fixing a date for his birth, even if it was a guess. Okay? December 25th it was, December 25th it's always been. Okay? If that's the case, then why don't they do the same thing for Easter? The day he was crucified, and then subsequently he rose, those 3 days. If you back engineer the dates to the year 0, you should be able to fix a date. Or not 0, excuse me, the year 33. You should be able to fix a date. What was the date in the year 33 that in fact Jesus was crucified, for example, and then rose? You can do it. It wouldn't be particularly difficult, and it would have been doable, completely doable, prior to the advent of computing. But they don't do that. Why don't they do that? Why is Easter a movable feast? Why? Well, I think there are 2 reasons. First of all, and you tell me in the comment section what you think, okay? First of all, I think that if they do that, then there's something that can be known about the authenticity of the dating of that event, incident, life, okay? And so to nail that down would be a bad idea. And I also think that the Vatican uses the risings and settings of the celestial bodies at around, a certain period of lunar months after Christmas to work its own brand of sorcery, shall we say. And so fixing the date for Easter for the Vatican would probably be a bad idea as well. Anyway, this is what I've been working on for the last couple of days, and I'm doing this in an effort to, to sort of help put some solidity around this idea of the false chronology, because it's a tough one, and it's really, really important that we get that that's seriously what's happened, and that we kind of, got that sort of cracked into our brain. It really is hugely important. So I'll bring some more points about that. Forgive my sniffles. It's, raining, Maine. It's raining and all of that. And then there were a couple of things that I did want to discuss, not really discuss, but anecdotally, I just have to say, it's so funny what we go through as hosts for these shows. I was trying to figure out what to wear. I mean, you have to be ready to go, and you have to have something suitable in the backseat of your car if you're going to do a show like this, the way I want to do a show like this, because when something comes up, you want to talk about it, you want to film it. So I'm thinking this morning to myself, I've got a couple of shirts, right, that are black and white striped. Okay? One of them I have, and this may seem silly, but it matters, okay? Let's talk about this. One of them, my husband bought me 2 years ago when he took me to Brittany to camp. We went camping and cycling, and he bought me one of those black and white, beautiful little black and white shirts. Very popular now, I've noticed, at least where I live. Lots of kids are wearing them, lots of adults are wearing them. But I can't wear that. I can't wear that in this sort of arena. Now, why do you think I can't wear that in this sort of arena? Additionally, before we left for holiday this summer, I bought a black and white striped, tailored shirt as well, this way, just to have something decent to throw on when we were with friends. Can't wear that either. Do you have any idea why I can't wear that? Because so many people out there will point at the screen and say, I knew it. She's a Mason. She's wearing black and white. Those are Masonic symbols. Everything she says in this video is meant to send a Masonic messages to her Masonic spy friend. Do you see? I mean, we have to think about things like that. Yes, black and white is a symbol of Masonry, and it is very important to make note of those things. But I, as an alternative media writer, researcher, lecturer, blah, 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 cannot afford to wear black and white in a setting like this, because people will stop listening to what I have to say, and they will simply start gabbing and gossiping and being horrified about the fact that that I'm wearing black and white, and that means I have Masonic ties. If you are interested, there is an interview on Hard True as well. Harold Calzbella and I did it on the 14th of October, I think 2014, and I do have it up, and it was done with a German fellow, but it was done in English, and I noticed in the comments section at some point not too long ago that someone had said, oh, it's amazing how many Illuminati symbols those two are using. And I just had to laugh, because I thought, okay. Watch, see for yourself, okay? You tell me what you're seeing. Anyway, I don't care. I just don't want to distract from what I'm saying, okay? I want you to hear what I'm saying. Now, as soon as I'm done with this, and I get it uploaded and hopefully get it out today raw, I'm going to do Terry Joyce in LA. Thankfully, I had to reschedule every single one of my interviews last week, with the exception of Randy Moggins, thanks to Mercury retrograde. And Mercury is, gone about its business now, and so making up for lost time with my interviews. The other thing I want to remind you, and I will continue to remind you of this until Christmas, and that is that I am on an unpaid leave, medical leave, for my son. My youngest son, is quite ill, and so I am furiously fundraising to keep us going for the next 4 months, 3 months now, I guess. It's late September. And that's just the way it is, and I'm doing it unabashedly. If you are somebody out there who has chronically ill children, or if you suffer from chronic illness yourself, you'll know what I mean when I say the expenses associated with this kind of thing skyrocket. And I know what the statistics are in this country, so I know that there's a fair percentage of people out there watching me who have lived through this, or are living through this, or certainly you might live through this in the future, okay? First, I want to say thank you to the people who have so generously donated. You have no idea what you've done to keep us going. This is food on the table and gas in the car and things like that, because I'm not working. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing that and for being generous about it. Sometimes people feel better about donating when they have more specifics about what's going on. So I do want to say that today, 26th of September, what I'm thinking about right now is getting my son to Boston again for the final round of evaluations and tests. And that's what I'm fundraising for right now, right this second, because those tests, I hope, will be the last in a line of evaluations that will let us know whether or not we have to consider opening up his spine again. He has not had to have that done since he was 8 years old, and I am very grateful for that. But that's the kind of situation that we're in right now, all right? The first time he had that done, I have to say, this is a story I want to tell because it's one of those things, it actually involves McDonald's, okay? And as much as I detest McDonald's and everything McDonald's stands for, when my son was 8 years old and he had to have his surgery on his spine, I had to stay in a Ronald McDonald house, and I was bloody glad it was there. I was damn glad it was there because it allowed myself and my ex-husband and his brother and sister to be near him. And there was a night that I will literally never forget. It was the night after his surgery, and he had to be we were in Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky, and he had to be put on a respiratory floor because there was no room for him on the surgical floor, and his neurosurgeon had left town and so was unaware that this had happened. I'm sure he wouldn't have stood for it. But anyway, because he was on a respiratory floor and not a post-op floor, the nurse forgot to start his post-op pain meds, and that poor child screamed in pain for about 14 hours before they got the pain under control again. And I was there on my own. I'd sent my ex-husband and my son away. My daughter was staying with a friend. And I massaged my poor child's back as close to the sort of incision as I could for 14 hours before my husband came back in. And I was unwilling to leave his side long enough to reach for the phone and get, his dad back over there to relieve me. So I just did it on my own. And they did come in the morning, and I left and I walked across the street to Ronald McDonald House thinking I was going to sleep, which I don't know why I was thinking that. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, I think. I don't know. It was still very dark, and it was about Halloween time, I think. And so I walked into the little lobby area no one else was there. I was all on my own, and there were a few sort of dimly lit lamps in the living area. And I sat down on a chair, and I realized that I really just needed to go back to the hospital. I wasn't comfortable leaving my son, and but then I thought, maybe I could just make a call and see how he is, And I picked up the phone, and I was so tired and so upset and so, just in that place that I could not figure out how to get an outside line. And I tried and tried and tried, and I couldn't figure it out. And I started to cry. And I was so upset. I feel like crying right now, but because of what happened next. There was a fella who came in through the front door finally. I don't know where he had been. God knows where his child was or what had happened, And he saw me sitting in the corner in this sort of dim light, and he walked over and he said, asked me if he could help me. And I said to him, I can't get an outside line, and my son is so sick, and I just need to find out how he is. And realized at that time just how I was feeling about it, And all he did, this guy who I don't even know his name and I will never see him again in my life, was help me work the phone. That's it. He just helped me work the phone and get my ex-husband on the phone and find out if everything was okay. So I tell that story because I had to stay in a Ronald McDonald house, okay? And God bless the fact that they exist next to children's hospitals everywhere. Anyway, okay, so this is 13.2, I think. Donations can be made and will be gratefully accepted at PayPal, worldlectures@aol.com. It's one word, all lowercase. You know, $5, $100, whatever. It doesn't matter. It all adds up, and it will help see us through. And if you are somebody with a chronically ill child, particularly if you have a diagnosis of the ultra rare condition that my son has, which is LMC-TCS. I'm not going to go into it any further than that. If your kid's got LMC-TCS, you know what I mean. Shoot me an email and we'll have a conversation, okay? Because it's a big deal. All right, so signing off for now. Thank you very much. And I'm going to reach around the back of the camera now and turn it off because it's my signature move, right? Okay, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.